Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 173.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new week of Let's Be Well Together. It's Elise Seifert, and today I'm joined with Sheila Webster.
Hi, Elise. I'm so happy to be here. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening to an audiobook.
Love audiobooks.
Love it. It's called To Have and to Hold, and it's a book about modern relationships and motherhood.
Oh, of course.
So the challenges that come with motherhood, and it's written by Millwood. And in the book, she was talking about something that I thought was fascinating for this podcast, and it was oxytocin in women.
Okay.
So first of all, women have a higher threshold for oxytocin, which is known as the love hormone.
Okay.
And that's why women are typically more
lovey-dovey and emotional and want to be connected. Yes.
and giving and nurturing. That's the word I was looking for. Yes. So that's typically why women are more nurturing. And she explained that a study was done and they found that women relationships, so female to female friendships, mother-daughters, sisters, female to female romantic relationships produce more oxytocin for women.
Okay. So interesting. So a husband and wife, it releases more oxytocin than a husband and wife would.
I guess, yes. And it's maybe a little different because definitely physical touch releases oxytocin.
Right.
And that's why it's kind of known as the love hormone.
Right.
Because that's what release oxytocin. But because women experience shared experiences, they often offer emotional support to each other when they're going through different events in their life. There's often a lot of laughter and fun. There's acts of kindness, and usually there's long-term bonds created in female-to-female relationships. And all of these things help to produce more oxytocin, as opposed to maybe a female-to-male friendship might not have all of these features. And it kind of made me reflect on a lot of movies, TV shows, books that I've seen that really explore the concept of female friendships or long-lasting female relationships. And, often you'll see these shows and these women might go through many different romantic relationships in their lives, but they're staying with these friends for so long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can think of so many, like Sex in the City or the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants or the Yaya Sisterhood.
Yes,
There's
definitely.
so many that kind of explore this theme about female friendships. And it made me think, is this why female friendships are usually so strong? Because there's more of this release of oxytocin.
Very interesting. And I think it's really important. So obviously you should keep up with your female friends, right? When you're really busy in life and stuff, you should try and strengthen those relationships. Don't let them die. And I definitely understand the whole sister thing because I have 3 sisters. So, and very close to my sisters.
Even though you're such different ages.
Yes, even though we're such different ages. Now, yeah, for sure, all 4 of them, and it's different at different times that I'm close to them. But yes, those are the ones you'll go to when you need things or when you're feeling like you need a little bit of support and stuff. And I get that because you do need that outside of your marriage. Yeah. You need a little bit of support outside of that because in a marriage, you're going through things together. So you're trying to support each other, but you need a little bit of understanding. And they do understand. Women understand those women issues, you know? So
especially with this book about motherhood.
Yes.
Yeah. How challenging new motherhood can be. And then, having female friends who can reach out and say, hey, I know what you're going through. Are you okay?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you have had friends who have had babies and these friends, their kids are like 7, 6, and you've never had these conversations with them before. No. And you've reached out to them, you've spoken to them. And then all of a sudden you have a baby and then you start telling them things and they're like, yeah, that's right. Oh no, I understand. And I support and this helps and that helps. And you're not going through it alone. And you're like, why haven't you ever told me this before?
Yeah, I had no idea what you were going through.
No idea that you were going through this.
Yeah. And I think it's hard because when you're having a baby, everyone's like, it's the best thing you're ever going to experience. It's so amazing. And you're just going to love every moment. And then you have the baby. You're like, I don't love every moment. This is really hard. I'm not sleeping. And I don't think people want to talk about it because it's not fun.
No, and it's not loving, and it's not gentle, and it's not mothering. That's
what women are supposed to be.
Yes, you're supposed to be
nurturing and loving every moment of it, because this is who you're meant to be, and this is biologically what you're supposed to do. And so, yeah, people don't really talk about it, but I think a lot of people go through it. And once you go through it, you can talk about it with your female friendships, and having those shared experiences, I think, really help for bonding. Also in the book, they talked about with your partner that you're sharing the parenthood experience with. It can be really hard because often they're like the only person you might have.
Right.
To help.
Yes.
And if they let you down,
you feel alone.
You feel so alone.
Yes.
Because you're like, that's the only person I have. I feel so alone. Whereas these female friendships, if they come and help you out, you're like, oh, this is great. This is just a little extra help I didn't expect. This is amazing.
Emotional help, physical help, spiritual help. Like you feel the support and the understanding and the nurturing. Yeah. And then of course it releases the oxytocin, which is another little extra bonus that we didn't even know about. No, I always find when I read this and I get all this information that the human body is amazing.
Isn't it?
Unbelievable how amazing it is and how it can repair itself and fix itself and release all these things that just help to make you manage, Yeah. Yeah. Even with pain,
Yeah. You don't even know it's happening.
No. So it's really, really cool.
It is. And I did reflect a lot on the friendships that I have. And I thought it's so amazing how easy it is to like fall into your friendships, even when you don't see them for a long time, when you have those meaningful female relationships. And it's really special to have those because you see it in different media outlets so much.
Yeah.
And then when you experience it, you're like, yeah, it is like that. Like it is like a sisterhood or a bonding experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know if men go through the same kind of thing, but I know that it's definitely something that is relevant to female relationships.
Definitely. But I have 6 brothers. And so I do feel that they also have that bonding experience, that they depend on each other and rely on each other for support. I don't think that they have the same type of loving, caring, it's more of a, slapstick and hit on the shoulder. Yeah, way to go, bud, or you're an idiot. But they do have the support.
Right. They're there for each other.
They're there for each other, just the way men are. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that men do have that and do need that. It's almost like the same way that we crave the emotional connection with other women. They crave that masculine, whatever it is, with other men, I'm sure it's a whole nother book that we could probably read to understand.
I'm sure there's a book out there. I'm sure there is. Because, it makes me think of teams, often.
That team bonding and how they have each other's back and that they will, go to war for each other, that kind of attitude. Like, yeah.
So it's definitely there.
Yeah, it's definitely there. It's just very different.
Yes.
So, yeah, I get it. And I think that it's really important to have those relationships, keep those relationships strong, the ones that you've had since you were a child, and then maybe through high school, different relationships, and then your mother-daughter, your sister, your aunts, like even your grandma. Like there's so many relationships that you can have and support, so you just need to keep that bond strong.
Yeah, because look, it's filling up your oxytocin cup.
That's awesome. Wow, what a good read, Elise.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the category of mental wellness. We all either experienced burnout in the workplace or we know someone who has. And we have the privilege of speaking with Richard Ellis, he likes to go by Rich, who both experienced burnout and is now a subject matter expert on topics such as workplace mental health. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Looking forward to chatting.
Richard Ellis began in the health and fitness industry, focusing on energy management, resilience, and well-being. He became an expert in a different subject about 2 decades ago. He specializes in helping business owners, corporate leaders, and teams unlock their full potential through optimal health and performance. He expanded his impact beyond one-on-one coaching, working with businesses to improve well-being and productivity. And his approach is simple but effective, helping individuals make small, sustainable changes that lead to massive shifts in energy, focus, and overall performance. He's known as the Energy Coach, and he engages with thousands of followers and fans across Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. He puts out a newsletter to help them create energy every day by making little changes in their lives. So today, Rich, we're talking about burnout. Maybe we can begin with identifying the problem. So what are some of the early signs of burnout?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on there. So one is the environment, and I think, from a work perspective, it can be resources, it can be a mismatch of values, it can be empathy or those soft skills from colleagues and superiors. A combination of those things, and those are things that can take their toll over time. And I think probably the feeling I'm getting from industry is that we are under-resourced. Often organizations are under-resourced and they're struggling to find the talent. And so people end up doing more than their fair share of their job. They're doing theirs, they're doing half of somebody else's, they may even be doing all of somebody else's. Well, that can take its toll over a period of time. And I think when you're doing something that you love and you've got that passion for what you do, I think that carries you a considerable way. But ultimately, when your hours go up, your workload goes up, that's something that's unsustainable over a longer period of time. And so that's one part of the environment. The other can be the home environment. There could be financial woes, there could be relationship issues, family problems. So those will be going in the back of somebody's mind while they're at work. And if there are things in both environments that are causing challenges, then one of those, the personal stuff is like a slow burn in the background that doesn't ever go away. And then the work challenges can be like peaks and troughs that add to that slow burn, which ultimately can exhaust somebody, push them over the edge to the point where then there's a hormonal disruption. And that hormonal disruption can then start to change behavior. And that behavior can be becoming snappy, short-tempered, short fuse, not being able to control emotions quite as well. So regulating that emotional response to things. It can go as far as sleep disruption. So sleep is not as good quality as it normally would be. The list goes on, and it starts to really eat away at the human being to the point where getting out of bed in the morning is a challenge, and you're not refreshed by sleep. So that's one of the classic tests is you've had what you think is a reasonable night's sleep. You wake up and you don't feel like you've had that sleep, and you drag yourself through the next day. And that can be a pretty horrible experience and something that I wouldn't wish on anybody. So those are some of the things that I see, John, and some of the ways it plays out in terms of how people then end up in that trough.
A couple questions. When you are talking about burnout, is that associated with the workplace? Like, is that the focus? Because I take it there's these symptoms apply in other contexts. And secondly, I think what you're saying is sometimes it's the workplace itself, what's going on at work and things that are happening there that are causing the burnout. Sometimes it's your personal life. And do you have a sense, just from your anecdotal stories, do you have a sense of, is it usually driven by the workplace? Is it usually driven by outside, a combination of both?
Yeah, I think a combination, but if you look at some of the stats, and I'm kind of talking from New Zealand's perspective because that's where I am, and some of the business surveys that are put out by organizations like Southern Cross, they'll do a biannual business survey. And reading that over the last few years, every couple of years, it's interesting to see that one of the biggest changes is that stress component in terms of it then triggering absenteeism and people quitting. And that hasn't changed. It's been a slow creep, and I think it's insidious. It's something that hasn't necessarily been addressed by all organizations, and those smart organizations that have addressed it are the people that are putting programs into place like the ones that I deliver. So I think, to answer your question, John, I think it's primarily the workplace because we have to turn up, we have to do our job, we have to satisfy our employers' requirements of us, but sometimes they're asking for more than is reasonable. But I think it is a combination. And depending on people's individual situations, there can be lots going on at home, or there can be everything's fine at home. I'm talking to a client this week. Interestingly, she's working in an organization that's very full on, very, very busy at the moment. But she also has a number of personal things going on in her life, which will come to an end. But at the moment, they are really taking their toll on her to the point where she can't really see the wood from the trees. And it's emotionally draining because it involves her children. And I suppose, those are sort of stages of life that they come and go. But, when those things come together, full on work, some issues with children that eventually will pass, but there's some real pain to go through first. It's horrible. When those both hit at the same time, that takes its toll.
So I'm a litigation lawyer. You can imagine that there are times in my workday that can be stressful. And
absolutely,
even though I may not feel burnt out, how do you see a difference between stress and burnout?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I ask people to rate their stress, often with clients, I'll get them to rate where they're feeling. And it's obviously a very subjective measure. But if they do it consistently over a period of time, they're very tuned into whether, is it pressure or is it stress? It's how you perceive it. Because pressure's good. Pressure is what gets us out of bed in the morning. It gets us to nail deadlines. It gets us to deliver that project, all those things which are important. But when that pressure turns into stress and it just feels like you're doing work with one arm tied behind your back, then that, I think, is when it takes its toll. It is very much about our perception of what we make it mean. And so different people are more resilient and different people are resilient compared to their colleagues who may even be in the same environment, but because they perceive it in a different way, it has a different impact on their body. And there's a fantastic book by Bruce Lipton, and it's called The Biology of Belief. And what he found was that, the way in which we perceive the world, the way in which we believe the things that are going on around us, in terms of how we see that has a very big impact on our chemistry, our internal chemistry. And so when we're thinking negatively and acting negatively, that chemistry is hurting us. It's harming us. When we're thinking positively and acting positively, that chemistry goes the other way and helps us. So we have very much more control over what we make it mean than I think we realize. But that doesn't take away the challenge of a stressful day with, you're in litigation. So, you're probably helping people that may be fighting each other on some level. And it's hard to not absorb that. It's quite challenging to create that emotional wall that prevents you from sort of soaking that up and absorbing it.
I think too, there have been times in my life where it did feel a little like burnout. And at those times, it felt kind of hopeless, almost like I was in a hole and I couldn't even look up to see the way out. Like I was just in that hole. And so like you wake up feeling like that, you're at work feeling like that, you're going home from work feeling like that, which to me is different than kind of like, I like the way you put it, the pressure, like I'm trying to persuade a judge about something and I don't know if it's working and I'm stressed, but that goes away when the situation goes away. So it does feel different to me.
Yeah. And I don't think everybody has that ability to discern the difference. Like you've clearly nailed it. And I suppose because you're in that environment regularly, John, you've learned to identify that. Whereas some people I talk to, when I say, what's your stress score? They don't really necessarily know how to answer. So I kind of elaborate and I say, well, stress might be this, but pressure might be that, or, deadlines might be this, and, and help them sort of identify what that means for them. And then they can put a score on it so we can put a number on the board. But yeah, it's different for everybody. And I think it's a continuum.
And you've kind of immersed yourself in this world, which is great because you're helping lots of people. How do you see burnout across different types of professions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think different industries have different challenges. I think that resource issue that I referred to earlier is kind of common to all. And I think some industries are struggling more than others. Let's take healthcare, for example. In that healthcare space, there's a lot of energy required to support other people directly. And that goes back to what I was saying before about that emotional wall. You're there to help and support people. But if you allow that wall to come down and you take on the burden of everybody else's problems, challenges, physical ailments, that's going to take you down. That's going to have an impact on your psyche and your physicality. the true professional is able to deliver the care that's required, but able to separate themselves from it emotionally so they can walk away at the end of the day and not have to decompress for 2 hours before they can have a conversation with a family member. Different industries, different challenges. It depends on the individual again. I think, the environment they're in, the way what they make it mean, and then how they manage their emotional energy.
You mentioned when we were preparing, and this caught me a bit by surprise, but you said that perfectionism and people pleasing tend to have an impact on burnout. How do you see those connections?
Yeah, I do. And I think I've got an element of it myself. I'm definitely a self-confessed people pleaser. And I think that's something I'm learning to manage myself. But I think when you do have that perfectionist mindset, you push yourself that little bit more. So you don't necessarily leave much in the tank. And one of the advice pieces that I give to those people that are recovering from burnout and looking after themselves, starting to look after themselves better than they may have been previously, is how can you leave something in the tank? And I sort of across all aspects of life. So they may have been very underactive. They may not have moved their body and used sort of exercise as a tool, which is a really, really useful one. But I say, even if you are going to try and build that into your life, make sure you leave something in the tank, because that perfectionist mindset is, I will just push myself to the wall because that's how I'm wired. So that perfectionist and people pleasing mindset, sometimes it's hard to turn the switch off and to allow yourself that little bit of space, that little bit of time to protect your own energy, to protect your own time, and to have some clear boundaries. And I think the perfectionist and the people pleasers struggle sometimes with those boundaries. I know I did, and I think that also plays into values. So a mismatch of values. So when you understand what your values are, then you understand the values of the organization you're working for. If there's a strong misalignment of those values, that again can be, you feel like you're sort of butting your head up against a brick wall, because the way the organization wants things done is different to the way you think they should be done. And so you keep hitting these brick walls. And so all of those sort of characteristics, I think, are a potential recipe for that burnout pathway. And I suppose recognizing that before you get there would be the key. And I think part of that is self-awareness. Who am I? What do I stand for? Have you gone through that values process so that you understand what's really important to you? Because it's values that drives behavior. And if you don't know what it is that's driving that behavior in yourself, how can you change it? Yeah, I think those are some key aspects of those individuals that may end up down that burnout pathway that others may not, even in the same organization.
We talked to somebody earlier, actually it was in the context of philosophy and ethics, but he has a really neat approach. His name's Ryan Bush, and he talks about trying to figure out the traits in yourself that you admire, that pursuing that part of yourself is a really good way to move forward. And that, the way I look at it, that's becoming your authentic self. And it sounds like, you're suggesting the same thing, and that people, if they can't be their authentic self, acting in the way they admire in terms of their work, I can see how that can create problems. Now, obviously, we just get to scratch the surface in a very brief interview, but you started moving into things like recovery and prevention. Can you tell us a little bit about, just high level, what are some of the practical strategies or the coping mechanisms that you help your clients understand as they work through this?
Absolutely. A recent example with a client who actually ended up taking time off work because it had become so challenging, so onerous, that his body was starting to fail, his brain was starting to fail him. And some of the things that we talked about in terms of the path back to a better health was, the classic one is that when people are busy, when they're under-resourced, when they're perfectionists, they want to do a really good job, that whole recipe means that they just keep pushing and pushing to the detriment of even sitting down and having a good quality meal. Now, we know that when the arrow starts to point on red and the orange light comes on in the car, we need to stop at a gas station to fill the car up, right? Otherwise, we're going to run out in the middle of the road and we're going to be stranded. And that's exactly the metaphor for individuals as well. If we don't stop and fuel ourselves, how can we possibly expect ourselves to perform well, both cognitively and physically, in a job that is high demand and takes a lot out of you. Often it will be, well, what are you eating? Oh, well, I'm a couple of pieces of toast for breakfast. I might skip lunch. I'm like, so you're getting to the afternoon and you've had about 100 calories. That's not going to be a recipe for success long term. And obviously, those aren't the words I tell them, but this is my sort of processing of where they're at. I'm like, right, let's start back at the beginning. Let's have a look at breakfast. Okay, we need a high level of protein in your diet, and that'll help stabilize those blood sugars. That will keep you going till lunchtime. What's happening at lunchtime, and so on. So the nutrition piece is really, really critical because of energy. We need fuel for energy, right? And we need good quality fuel. So that's a key piece. The other piece is keeping some in the tank, leaving some in the tank. So is there an opportunity to shorten your work day on even 1 or 2 days a week? Is there an opportunity to even work from home so that you're slightly more in control of your environment, and it means you probably don't have to do as much commuting? Looking at sleep, of course, is a huge piece of that. And sometimes if sleep is disrupted, it doesn't come back on track straight away. It takes time and consistency. So getting the sleep right. And then I talked about movement. Our bodies are designed to move. We're not designed to sit at a chair in front of a screen all day long. So increasing the level of movement in the body is really, really important so that you have that level of physical tiredness at the end of a day that helps with that sleep. That physical tiredness is a key component to getting a good night's sleep. And when we're sitting all day, we're just not moving and we're not building that tiredness into our system. So it sounds like quite a long list, but when we break it down, it's all about finding the little things, the 1%ers, and just tweaking them slightly so that it doesn't feel like an onerous task, and people can start to get back on track with some of those key activities that help look after themselves, which don't feel like they're going to take an enormous amount of time out of their day and their week to achieve.
I'm sure there's a bunch of other strategies that you work on. We're kind of out of time. But just so you know, actually a couple themes you mentioned. So we actually have a segment on our show called Move That Body. And my experience and story was all about learning how important it was to put movement into my life and keep it in my life. So I love that you're emphasizing that. There's a question I ask every guest at the end of an interview, but just before I turn there, I don't want to cut you off. So is there anything else you want to tell us about burnout prevention or recovery before I turn to that question?
Yeah, I think there's probably one piece that I haven't talked about, which I think is really, really important, is understanding the nervous system and understanding that the pathway into burnout is often because we've stayed in that fight or flight state. So we've got two parts to our autonomic nervous system. We've got the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And those names aren't very useful because actually it's the sympathetic state that we're in when we're heading towards burnout, because we're in that fight, flight, freeze state. Our bodies aren't designed to be in that state for long periods of time. They're designed to be in it temporarily for flight or for fight so that we can escape or fight. And then we calm down, we sit in our cave, we light the fire, and we're calm again. Now, modern day life is steering us away from that habit, is keeping us in that fight or flight for longer. And so that's having an effect on our hormones, it's having an effect on our energy levels. So what I'm getting around to saying is that the behaviors that we need to drive are those parasympathetic behaviors. So we shift our nervous system into a more rest and digest state. Going out and training for a marathon is not the advice I'd give to someone who's trying to recover from burnout. Certainly get out and do some walks. Certainly keep using the gym, but look for working in movements as opposed to working out movements. So we all know what working out is, but not everyone has heard of working in. And so working in is a movement of your body that actually gives energy back rather than uses energy. And that's what our bodies are craving when we're in that state, with that burnt out state, is we need more energy because we've used so much of it. And so things like yoga, Tai Chi, gentle breathing, even picking up more meditation type activities where you're focusing on your breath is a really nice way of moving the body gently, moving it so that it gets the movement that it's designed to achieve, but it's done in such a gentle way that you're actually giving back to your body rather than taking away. And the test for this is, there's a couple of tests. So one is that you can do a moving in movement with a full stomach and not feel the ill effects, not feel queasy or you can keep that food down because it's such gentle movement. And the other one would be that you could keep a conversation going. So if you were out for a walk, you would still be able to maintain a good conversation with a person next to you while you're walking. So those would be the tests to know that you're working in as opposed to working out. And then your body will appreciate, it will take that on board. It will absorb the energy that you're getting from those gentle movements. And that means your nervous system is in the parasympathetic state rather than that sympathetic state. And the more you can do that, the quicker you'll be on that road to recovery.
One of the best things about doing a podcast is I enjoy hearing something new and working in. I never heard that before. It makes a lot of sense. And I really like it too when somebody gives us a practical way to think about it. And I like that, for example, that you can do it on a full stomach. You can continue to carry out a conversation. That's fantastic. So thanks for that.
Cool.
So on our show, we explore a bunch of different areas of wellness. And we ask every guest the same question in a context where we have these areas, but not enough time to focus on all of them at any given time. So we do a mini wellness check-in. So Rich, today, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one activity you could do to foster wellness in that area?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really great question. This actually came up fairly recently because I went and did a fairly grueling hike with my brother over in the UK recently. And when I came back, I was so broken that I couldn't actually do any of the activities that I normally enjoy doing. So walking, running, gym work. And it took a while for my body to recover. And I realized that I needed to spend more time on finding ways in which my self-worth was attached to other things. So I realized that if I wasn't doing those things, I didn't know who I was. And so I realized that was having a negative impact on my mental health. So I realized I'd put all my eggs in the same basket. And so my challenge to myself is, what can I learn from that? What can I take from that? And how can I put some of those eggs in different baskets so that if I am physically compromised, I don't lose myself and sort of struggle to know what to do next. So my challenge to myself is to work on that, to find other areas of life that have meaning for me, that I see as part of my identity, that isn't all about the running, the gym, and the walking, those sorts of things. So yeah, that's something I'm working on right now, John.
One of the most important things, and it sounds like it kind of fits into burnout too, is just taking that moment to stop. Just taking that moment to stop and think about this, because we often come up with a solution and an answer and change our conduct because of it. So I wish you luck, and I hope you figure out the answer to those questions.
Thanks, John. I think I'm still working on it.
All right. Well, thanks very much. We're going to have you back very soon for a second interview. Appreciate your time today.
Right. Thank you, John. Looking forward to it. And thanks for your time today.
We're glad you're here, and we hope you're making wellness a priority. Hope you're getting something out of the podcast. And especially for people who are new, you might not know that the podcast was inspired by my book, Accidentally Well by John Webster. It's available on Amazon, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere where you can buy books online. And this is my pitch for you to buy a copy and have a read. I think it'll enhance the experience of the podcast, and it will also help us defray some costs because it's really expensive putting out a podcast. So grab a copy if you can, and in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the show.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
Okay, we're back with David Amerland, who's been a repeat guest recently. He knows so much about physical wellness, and we really appreciate his input. And today I want to talk about kind of two things. Maybe they're related sometimes, maybe they're contradictory sometimes, but I want to talk about A, setting targets, but also B, being kind to yourself. So where do we go?
All right, let's talk about both. Yes. Okay, usually when we think about fitness, what comes to mind first of all? Targets. That's the first thing we actually think of. We need to lose weight. We need to grow our muscles. We need to increase our distance if we're running. Whatever it is, some kind of leaderboard we set up for ourselves. Then we are at the bottom, we have to get to the top, which is like ridiculous because fitness shouldn't work like that.
No, but for sure, like a lot of us, myself included, you get caught up in it is setting the targets and kind of being accountable to those targets that you think keeps you getting out there. It takes a long time before it's the feeling, the love of the feeling of it that keeps you out there. But for many of us, you need those targets. Otherwise, why are you doing it?
Yes. Okay. I totally agree. This is the double-edged sword, right, of working like this. If targets are the thing which gets you going in the first instance, by all means, have them there. And let's use them to actually exercise, because doing any kind of exercise is better than doing no exercise at all. But here's what it is. Targets are always going to be missed at some point for whatever reason. We are an open system when it comes to environment. We're not sort of static. Our body is in constant flow with the external world. We're not the same people neurochemically and hormonally from day to day. And certainly if you're a woman, the experience is a lot more than guys. Okay, we tend to be a little bit more stable in our sort of hormonal cycle, hormonal profiles from day to day, but women certainly feel a lot more fluctuations. So if we just focus on targets and we start missing them, then the negative self-talk, which we all have in our head, begins to kick in. We don't feel worthy, we don't feel capable, we feel that we're missing out, we don't feel having the willpower and the discipline and all the things which we use as labels to beat ourselves up with. And this is counterproductive. We're exercising to feel good, not the other way around. This is where being kind to ourselves actually steps in. We should be able to forgive the fact that, okay, on a particular day we didn't perform as expected. On a particular day we didn't find the time to exercise. So what? If it's just one day out of 365, does it even matter? And if we take that approach, then we're more likely to basically continue to do the things which we do, which are good for us, as opposed to finding reasons that we are not worthy of the targets we're actually setting for ourselves. And this is where the mental capacity to be kind actually kicks in. We should be kind to ourselves. We should start extending that kindness to what we do and also feeling good about the things which we do. Having that approach, that mindset, in the long term will benefit us psychologically, for sure. It's better for our mental health. It will then also help us in terms of our mindset, and that will help us physically. And those three things are connected. So it's important to have that approach. And when it comes to fitness, kindness usually is the last thing we think about. We don't think we should be forgiving to ourselves for missing targets or missing a training session. We're not doing as well as we should at a training session, or even, doing well one day and doing badly the next. For whatever reason, there's a multiplicity of factors that go into that. But we don't tend to think of those factors. We tend to think of the fact that, hey, today we're not as good. Oh, this is terrible. We must be really bad at it. Maybe we should give it up. The voice is there all the time. Maybe we're not so good. Maybe we're pretending to be good. All those things, all those schemas in our head that conspire to bring us down. And from an evolutionary perspective, that negative self-talk actually does have a survival advantage. We came out of the caves, the two people talking about it, one of them said, hey, this is a good day to go over the hill and see what's on the other side. And the person who had the negative self-talk thought, no water, no resources, going to be on our own. We only have a club, I'm going to stay here. The person who went over the hill maybe never came back, so they didn't reproduce. So the person who stayed within the safety of the cave in his tribe actually, got to survive. So that's why we have so many of us have that strong voice in our head, which is holding us back. But these days we don't face these life-threatening situations. So it tends to handicap us when you should actually, what we need is a cheerleader. And we should be saying to ourselves,
It's a really good message. And I just recently had some negative self-talk experiences. And actually today kind of broke through because I mentioned one of the times we were talking that had a really good groove in my workouts, and then I got sick and I fell off. And one of the things I do is I run about 1 kilometer from my house, and there's a place it's not really a track, but it's a nice 400 or 500 meter circle. And I would do some intervals. But I ended up putting on some weight when I was sick, and my running is starting to feel worse. Like I feel like I'm just kind of trudging along and I can't really accelerate very well. And for the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, every time I think about going to do the intervals, I had all this negative self-talk and decided not to. But today I thought, just do what you can and don't worry about how fast it is and just go. And so this morning I did that kilometer. I got to that track. I did my intervals. I wasn't very fast compared to usual. It would have been a complete flop like 4 months ago, but I had a huge smile the whole way back because I felt good and it worked. And now I know that I can do it. And even though I shouldn't have those self-doubts, why? Like, why are we designed that way? So it's a really good message, just give yourself a break, do what you can, because I bet you 2 months from now, I'll be out there moving faster again and feeling much better about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's so healthy you said that. So you actually say you became your own cheerleader. You said, go out there, do your best, enjoy yourself, have a great time. You're actually moving your body. You're doing something which you like. And forget about, oh, I didn't do it as well as, 2 months ago. You were ill. I mean, realistically, your body put on weight because you had to. Again, it was designed to help you. Everything the body does pretty much these days is designed to help us. And only goes wrong when we basically only focus on just that one aspect of it instead of putting in all the other things which also it needs in order to function, and then it malfunctions.
Okay, well, it's kind of two unruly horses to ride, but I do think there's a benefit to both, setting targets, but then don't give up. Don't feel bad about yourself if you don't hit them. Be kind to yourself and find a way back on track. And we had a whole interview about sustainable health, and I think that's a way to keep you coming back to it for life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it couldn't be better.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way. It is sign-up time. It's John here with Sheila.
Yeah, here we are.
Sheila pointed out that she almost always starts sign-off. Makes sense to me because she actually at the end is the one who says, see you later, basically. Mm-hmm. Anyway, lots of things going on this week. A few of them. I'm really enjoying my runs still. A few weeks ago, I mentioned that I was lengthening my runs, and now it's starting to pay dividends. Because this weekend, for example, I did a long run, and it's probably the best I felt on a long run in a while. I was just listening to music and trucking along, and I felt good and energized, and as if I could pick up the pace anytime. I'm also doing rowing on some of my off days. And the first few times I tried rowing, it was really hard. It was more just my body felt awkward, but now it's used to it. And so that's great. So I'm feeling really great physically right now, which is fantastic. And we just spent a long weekend here in Ontario, Canada. We took time to get our backyard in order, get all the pool going, the chemicals and all that, making sure they're at the right balance. And we changed some stuff up and got rid of some old stuff and got some new stuff and tinkered around a bit. And it's really looking good back there, making me look forward to a nice summer where having the backyard almost makes it feel like you have a whole new room in your house that you get to enjoy after being stuck in winter. How about you, Sheila?
Well, I feel like I almost had 2 weekends. It was a long weekend here, but I also had Thursday and Friday off. So I went up to Owen Sound and I did 2 really fun things up there. We went to the Tom Thompson Gallery Museum and we took Michael. Elise thought that he would really like it. And it was so adorable. And he did really like it. And it was just really great experience. And then we went to a library baby group. And I just think it's so cool that there's all these things that you can go to for free. We went to the museum, we went to the library. Like this little baby group was so adorable. They took out a bubble machine and there were bubbles and we were singing about bubbles and we sang for a half hour and it was just adorable. So I loved that. We had 2 dinners this weekend. So that was really nice. Our son and his girlfriend made dinner for us on Friday and we went for a bike ride. And then on Monday, my brother invited us over for dinner. So we had 2 dinners, socially excellent. Got some gardening done. So not only did we get our backyard, but got some gardening. So I was really happy about that. And I really enjoyed our downtime this weekend, John.
Yeah, you're not usually one to take downtime. Right?
Yeah.
But between the weather not being great and me just wanting to chill out a bit and you agreeing to,
yes,
we had some nice downtime.
So I really enjoyed that too. It's nice to just take time to relax. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.